When we started doing our Upstate California listening tour, we used a map that we found under the auspices of UC Berkeley. So we assumed, well, if this map from UC Berkeley tells us that this is the definitive map of tribal lands, then it must be so. But the interesting part is that we've learned that actually tribal lands are First Peoples. There are so many more tribes than we could possibly have known about that aren't mentioned here, and that these are more sort of linguistic, more sort of groupings of linguistic similarities and correlations. So I wanted to kind of acknowledge that. It's always very sensitive acknowledging tribal lands, because who are we to properly acknowledge that which we have all but exterminated? So I wanted to acknowledge, and I wondered, because I will probably fail to pronounce these correctly, is there anyone in the room, perhaps yourself, who would like to pronounce these for me properly?
The first two are commonly referred to now as the Pit River tribe. That's the Achamawi and the Otsagawi. You can see it in the northeast corner. They're referred to collectively as the Pit River tribe. Then there's the Klamath, which kind of goes into southern Oregon to Nome Lackey, Shasta, Wintu, Yahi, and Yana.
And right here, right now, what is the prevailing tribe that you would normally acknowledge?
Yeah, we're in Wintu country.
Wintu country.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So the California Creative Corps, what is it? It's an economic and workforce recovery pilot program intended to fuel positivity, regain public trust, and inspire health and safety across California's diverse populations. And we know that the creative sector has endured but suffered. It's been devastated in areas of America, and it's no surprise that we would connect this with the idea of regaining public trust and inspiring health and safety across our diverse population. The idea is, and this is where it gets really exciting, generally speaking, historically, California Arts Council has, when it spends down its, compared to other states, meager funds to support the arts and invest in the arts, usually these funds go towards organizations who then support artists. This is an opportunity beyond any other we've known that will put artists to work. Organizations, arts organizations, and social service organizations and units of government may apply to this, but they must state very clearly that they will be employing artists who will be at the forefront of creating campaigns to increase awareness around issues critical to society. So what are these issues? We've been given some clues as an administering organization for the upstate region. Let's increase public awareness around water and energy conservation, climate change and mitigation, and emergency preparedness, relief and recovery, and disaster response. And I've just put there, including fire. Civic engagement, social justice and community engagement, and public health awareness. The input that you give as individual communities will impact the way we write our grant guidelines. We know that upstate California is different from every other region. There are things that we have in common with one another that are completely different from the South. And so we wanted to hear from you before we create our guidelines. So we're going to be looking at a new tool for evaluating the relative health of communities around California today. It's called the California Healthy Places Index. It was developed by the Public Health Alliance of Southern California. Please don't be put off by the amount of data. We know that what we are told are the markers for a healthy community may not tally with your own lived experiences in Shasta. When we look into the California Healthy Places Index map, which we will in just a moment, there will be a place where for every single community that we look at, which we look at by tract by tract, and we'll explain why that is in a moment, you will be able to find the racial or ethnic makeup of that particular community. And again, this is a clue to how you might frame a project which creates meaning and can help prove conditions in that community if you're an artist or an organization working together. we do ask you to look, we will ask you to show an awareness and acknowledgement of this, because there are such obvious correlations between a community's health and this. Here are the markers that the California Healthy Places Index has said these are the factors that determine a community's well-being, its health, its relative health. This is just a broad look at what Shasta looks like. Bear in mind there are many census tracts in Shasta, and if you dive into any one of them, it will give you slightly different information about that's specific to those tracts.
Generally, overall, the scores were quite high for Shasta County. A very large range of per capita income, $18,000 from a tract around the Shasta Lake area, and $51,000 the highest in this Texas Spring Roads area. The lowest scores by the county are summarized there. And again, this is just sort of a glimpse for you to look at and see, again, for indicators of what are some of these areas, what are some of the topics we might want to look at.
So if you look at Shasta, you can see an incredible variety. You can see pale blue. I think there's some gorgeous dark green, which is a good thing, but you also see a swathe of dark blue, which isn't looking great, and you would know the reason for that. But this again is a clue for you to collectively look at these dark blue areas and think, what are the reasons? How can I use the Healthy Places Index to kind of burrow into and create narrative from some of this? So what you do is you click on that tract, that dark blue bit, and immediately to the left-hand side, the community conditions that tell you what are those things that are defining that area come up.
Well, this is in fact the lowest scoring tract for all of Shasta County, the one that has the lowest overall score of all the indices. So thus, that's helpful for us to just start here and see and try to understand what's going on. So this tract is at the 3.7 percentile. That basically means that relative to other tracts in California, there are 3.7 that have a lower score. 3.7% of tracts have a lower score. So 96.3, right? Did I get that right? Percent of tracts actually score higher than this one. The thing that is very different from what we've seen in a lot of other counties is the difference between this tract and the rest of the county. 50 percentile, we've been going to a lot of dark blue areas in California lately. So it's like, what's going on that makes it so different than the rest of the county? With the economic, we can see right away it's dark blue for all three of the economic indices: above poverty, employed, and per capita income. Let's go ahead and open employed since it has such a low score. Let's see how that compares with the county. The employment levels for this tract are at the 0.6 percentile. The county's at 39.3 percentile, so it's quite different. So you can look at this, and if you're interested in understanding more of why this metric even matters, you get the information here as well, telling you about what the indicator measures. It's the people aged 25 to 64 with a job. It describes as well how this is connected to health.
This is a listening tour. This is a listening session. What you share with us now will help inform the guidelines that we create through which you apply for funding. So some of the factors that might determine how much a county or region will be apportioned, well, if you divide up the close to 3.4 million, which is how much we have for the upstate region to go into the pockets of artists and organizations working with artists, it would be about 170 or 180,000 per county. So we could do it like that. That would certainly be easiest for us. But how about we also look at the county density of blue areas or health outcomes? How about we look at county population, its geographic size, its tribal and ethnic considerations and composition? We will be looking at racial and cultural equity within this picture. We already know it matters, and we encourage you to as well. We'll be, of course, regardless of anything, be looking at the overall proposal strength. We're going to be looking at the likelihood that your proposal will turn into a project that can become a case study that California as a state can be proud of, that communities across the other side of America or elsewhere in the world could use it. How replicable is it? Be thinking about this as artists. How will I know if my project is successful? How am I going to document it? So that we can shine a light on it, shine a light on you, and for it to be used elsewhere.
And what I see here is what we're so aware, what we've been aware of for 2 or 3 years, that there's not a lot of economic support to local artists, emerging artists. And that's what we've been doing and dealing with since we started. So this is great that there's going to be opportunity to get funding to keep supporting local artists and to create something.
I look at that map and think about where that's centered, and it is downtown. But I also know that that map doesn't represent what is going on downtown for us. There's a lot of, there are not a lot of family units in the area, but there's a lot of new housing development that's going. The redevelopment of downtown isn't representative of that map. And so those of us in this room know what strides we've made, what huge strides we've made over the last 10 years in the downtown areas.
I think one thing as putting on local theater that I find challenging is collaborating with musicians, because just like if we wanted to do a live performance, being able to have the funding to pay for live pit musicians, once you get, all your licensing costs covered. And if you have a small venue, you can only sell so many tickets. And so I think finding some ways that we can provide space for musicians and have money set aside to be able to pay those musicians, just because sometimes in like a musical theater budget, it's not there to have live musicians. And then we have the option of our tracks.
Now you need to marry that need with something you see in the Healthy Places Index, and then create a case for support around it. The overall aim is to do such a great job in Shasta and in the other counties that the state will have everything, the California Arts Council will have everything it needs to report back to the state in order that this is no longer a pilot program, but it happens every year. Imagine that. It's amazing.
I guess there's been as much as there's been an anti-intellectual sort of sentimentality across this country over the last couple decades. I personally believe there's an already established avoidance towards the creative music and art. A good example would be several different live music venues being set up within my lifetime within the Reading area, and them being shut down for what might be seen as reasons that are not adequate to shut down a business. There's an aversion to music and arts and culture, I think, in this area.
Just had a comment inspired by your question, and in terms of being visible, being valued, those kind of things. What we learned with COVID, when the governor's office issued reopening guidelines for each industry, like under these conditions and this level of transmission and all that kind of stuff, your business has to have these safety protocols in place to open. The creative sector was not in any of the reopening guidelines, including film and television. But it was a real big wake-up call for all of us in the field of like, wow, we have a visibility issue.
That rural communities are not just faced with BIPOC issues, but we're faced with poverty issues. And I think the poverty issue could be connected to the arts in such a basic way that when you have an educational system that basically puts the arts last on the docket, you're not educating children from the very time they're, starting their lives to understand and appreciate the arts. So I'm encouraged that Prop 28 was passed. I think that's going to help a lot.
So I encourage the board of directors at Shasta County Arts Council to become experts in the Healthy Places Index, just enough that you can put to bed any fear or sort of righteous indignation around the data you are understanding versus lived experiences. Keep bringing it back to your lived experiences and what projects you can encourage community organizations and artists to create. Don't sit back and wait for artists to come to you. Go out and start looking for artists. Don't think about just visual artists, although visual artists are great. Think about the digital arts, digital media, film, technology. Think about the literary artists, theatre, musicians, and start having conversations and start generating interest around what you know to be of value.